Okay, we're going to be going live on YouTube and then I'll share that directly to Facebook. Is that okay with you?
Totally fine.
Okay, let's see how it goes setting up. Okay, so we are live.
Awesome.
Welcome, Toby. I'm just going to quickly see if you can introduce yourself. Oh, and then now I need to call that. If you can introduce yourself to our attendees while I share this live on Facebook.
Yeah, no worries. Hi, everyone tuning in. My name's Toby Thorpe. I'm 18 years old and a very proud full-time climate activist and advocate based in the Huon Valley in Tasmania. And I've been in this space for around 6 years now. And I guess that's me in a nutshell, but broader is that I work across organisations, inter-organisational activist, I guess you can say. I've been to the most recent COP25 in Madrid and COP24 in Katowice. I do lots of really cool programs in Tasmania, which engages hundreds of high school students every year in a ground-up approach to build the climate movement. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say because I do so much. It's always hard to introduce myself without seeming like I'm a bit of a climate nerd, because I am, but I don't want people to know that.
We love climate nerds at Extinction Rebellion. Yeah, I was looking through your bio. I just couldn't believe how much you have done before you have turned the adult age. I was just so impressed. And, you know, winning a global award for sustainable energy is really incredible. But if you don't mind, we'll circle back to that one. But
No worries.
yeah, thank you for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with you. And I'm not sure if you know this, but I grew up in the Huon Valley as well, in Huonville actually. I was wondering if you could perhaps speak a little bit about what compelled you to first become a climate activist and how maybe growing up in the Huon Valley, you know, the good bits and the bad bits may have shaped your passion for advocating for climate action and the environment.
Yeah, great question. And I'm glad that you had the privilege to grow up in the Huon Valley as well, because it's such an incredible place of the world. And I guess my answer is complicated. It is very complicated, but recently I've reshaped the answer to that question as I reflected on my past. And I guess, you know, recognizing that growing up in the Huon Valley with such a privilege to be surrounded by, you know, lush green wildlife, the most breathable air in the world of the kind, you know, amazing forests, like it's just an incredible place to grow up. And you naturally grow up with a connection to the environment here. Like, you know, it's inevitable. But my dad, like my story sort of starts when my dad was working in the forestry industry around the forestry agreement time. And he was made redundant, and obviously that come with a whole negligence against the green movement. So I basically started on the opposite side of where I am now, in theory. And that's to say that I didn't grow up in a family or didn't grow up in an environment where I did care about the environment, or I was part of the green community or the activist community. I was on the completely other end, the complete opposite end. So my journey sort of starts recognizing that when my dad was made redundant from the forestry industry, which is, you know, was a big part of the environment history here in Tasmania, we were forced to move interstate due to unemployment, where he continued to work in the mining industry. So that's the sort of background I come from. But recognizing, and I was just saying to Claire at the start of this call when we weren't live, that recognizing that as a young person being brought up in any society around the world, fairness and equity is at the heart of everything we do and everything we're taught. The first maths question you will learn is, if you had a piece of chocolate and you had to share it amongst 4 friends, how many pieces would they get? Fairness and equity is such a big part of young people. And as a young person, I think that we understand fairness and equity more than any other generation. And now when I reflect to the environmental crises and the climate crisis, it's unfair, it's not just, it's not equal. And I understand that from my upbringing.
Yeah.
But now when I reflect on, you know, why I become an activist from, you know, that nerd at school that did this science project to get extra credits and then ended up winning this global international award in conjunction with my school. Now when I say I'm a climate activist, I say to them, I don't have an excuse not to be, because I've met people that, you know, I have friends in Arshak in Russia who strikes on Fridays like I do, who went to jail and was tortured for 6 days. I've met young people who visit their grandparents' graves underwater. I've met young people who strike and literally don't eat on a Friday because they're not working and don't have the income to feed themselves. What excuse do I have, even though in the Huon Valley as a regional, rural, even young person, that opportunity is so inaccessible? I'm still not at, you know, that city slicker level of where I have these things given to me, I guess, in a societal stereotype. But I don't have the excuse of not being a climate activist when I have generational peers on the front lines of climate change, feeling the effects first and worst, but knowing that what I do here and what Australia is doing is causing that unfairness and that unjust world. So that's why I'm a climate activist, is that I don't have an excuse not to be.
Wow, that's pretty powerful and inspiring. And do you think that that may be the challenge for a lot of Australians, that they just haven't experienced what it's like for other people who are suffering right now around the climate crisis? And we're sort of in a bit of a bubble here in the lucky country. Well, not so much in 2020, but yeah.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is negligence. You know, it is such a big issue, and it does take a long time for people to understand and connect the dots, because it is complicated. But I think it's also a governmental issue, is that democracy has failed us in this country. And I think that the top-down approach from our governmental structures at the moment, which is not systematic, has failed, and it's caused that climate negligence in Australia among, you know, certain demographics of people. But yeah, I also agree that I think not being able to understand the issue and see them frontline impacts as what I have is because that's influenced me a huge amount. But that's why, you know, I'm an activist, is because that's my role, is to share their stories and make sure that they're told, because their stories need to be told to shape our action here in Australia. Yeah, I think, you know, coming from that background of, you know, being impacted, my family being impacted by the environment movement during the forestry agreement in Tasmania, it's really shaped that, you know, this is an issue of everyone, and the effects of climate change, if you're not feeling them now, because they aren't everyone's back door, but if you're not recognizing them, you will very soon. And that goes to anyone. The climate crisis doesn't, you know, discriminate against your demographic, your net worth, your sexuality, gender, religion, wherever you are in this world, it affects you. But we need to make that link to say it affects you in different ways and in different countries. It's affecting them first and worst. There are people being displaced, there's climate refugees, there's people visiting graves underwater. Like, what is this world? And we need to take action on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, do you think that with COVID-19, sorry, I'm sort of ripping with you a little bit now, you know, it's brought together this sense that we are all connected. Alone Together has been a hashtag trending. And do you think that this sort of sense that we're all sort of being impacted by a virus that started in one place of the world, but it's impacted all of us, do you think that that sense of global community might help sort of the collective humanity decide to act on a more cooperative way around the climate crisis?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting topic to discuss about, because COVID-19 and the climate crisis, there's so many interlinkages between the inequalities that both these issues face. But it comes back to that, you know, the society, basically COVID-19 right now is, for me, bringing a light on all the inequalities in our society, to be so much more present in everyone's life. Because we make that linkages as a climate activist, I can make that acknowledgement that, you know, this is unfair, jobs are at risk, health's at risk, people losing their homes, lives, etc. That's a big thing of the climate crisis, but that's the same thing in the COVID-19 crisis, is that the same people and the same demographics are feeling the effects first and worst. And that comes back to society needs to change, our structure needs to change. And I think if you don't believe in climate change, you're still realizing that right now, because COVID-19 is an issue that you can just not disregard. Like, if you disregard COVID-19, then you must be pretty stupid. Excuse that slang, but it's just, you know, it's so present right now. If you're not making that acknowledgement that people who are on low income wages, people in low socioeconomic areas, women, children, people with disabilities, First Nations people in low-lying countries, they're feeling these effects first and worst. They're feeling them far more than what I am in the Huon Valley and what you are in Tasmania. But that's the same with the climate crisis. It's exactly the same. And if you make that link back to, this is the society that we live in that perpetuates inequality, then aren't we all going to be trying to change that system? Because climate action is only needed because the system failed. It is a side effect of a systematic failure. It's not just an issue that was developed on its own. It's a side effect of society failing. So that's the root cause that we need to be tackling. And I think COVID-19 will be inspiring so many more people to tackle that system.
I really agree with you there. I'm glad you sort of said that, because there's sort of a little issue within Extinction Rebellion where some people sort of say we don't have time, or we can't fix the global justice issues. We need to focus on, you know, sort of Band-Aid fixes on climate change. But I think what you've touched on then is that they will be just Band-Aid fixes if we don't look at the root causes. And that's why I really love reading your work, because you speak about, and following you, because you talk about justice, and it's so important, I think, and it's something that people are just starting to learn about. So thank you for that.
No, it's totally fine.
I know we're going to touch on that question later, but yeah, I'm also intrigued around the award that you won, and, you know, what elements of equity and justice do you bring to that project, the Community Energy Hub, and maybe talk a little bit about what the goals were for that, and yeah, your experience around winning that award, and what it may have brought to the community there in the Huon Valley and yourself.
Yeah, that's also a strong part of the starting of my adventure, and that's full credit to a woman named Nell Smith, who inspired me entirely during that project. And that was a collaborative effort at Huonville High School, the school that I attended. And basically that started with just like a really funky science project that the school principal asked if I'd be interested in supporting, as she did other students. I said, yeah, sure, this sounds exciting. But I'd never expected it to 6 months later, after submitting a project proposal, to be told, hey, Toby, you and your mum need to come to Abu Dhabi for an awards ceremony. Like, that was just the most shocking thing. My mum had never left the country. You know, sustainability was really a new thing for me then. But it was such an inspiring journey, but also such a, you know, a unrealistic adventure of realizing my place in the climate movement. And that started at a local level, and that comes from the term like think local, act global. And basically what that prize was, it's called the Zayed Sustainability Prize, and it's the world's most prestigious and largest award based around innovation in renewable energy and sustainability. And a category of that prize is global high schools, so recognizing high schools and projects within high schools that are addressing the sustainable development goals. And we won in 2017 at Huonville High School, and it came with $100,000, so around 130,000 Australian dollars. And you know, being on that stage with the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, President of Kazakhstan, 13 other world leaders, was like, oh my God, you know, public high school students can achieve this. Public high schools are incredible. Regional and rural areas are incredible, and we can do incredible things. And that was the real starting point to the inspiration to be active in my community, is that there was that something to look forward to. That was that stance to say, you know what, we can achieve things, we can change the world no matter where we are. And I mean, I stood on that stage with a formal school uniform that we had to make because my school didn't have a formal school uniform. That's the sort of background where that come from, and it developed into a huge community project of building this community energy hub, because sometimes when we think about energy efficiency or sustainability or local action within our homes or architecture or technology, it seems so inaccessible, not just here in Tasmania, but especially in areas like the Huon Valley. So what we wanted to do was bring all that technology and them solutions to showcase that to families, to students, to experts across the Huon Valley. And this energy hub now not only showcases actual practical solutions you can take to reduce any energy usage in your home, like triple glazed glazing, or there's 12 windows, everyone's different. It also showcases solar. So students now use the solar energy within their science classes. They analyze the solar analytics. It showcases other technologies. We engage high school students and primary school students across the Huon Valley in learning about the climate crisis, in learning about sustainability, in learning about the local actions they can take within their own home. That's basically what that project was, but it grew into something so much larger than what we thought it would be, and it's still running right now. It turned into an icon of Huon Valley is on the map, and this is what we need to become a brand, I think, of Huonville High School. It become a brand of activity in the Huon Valley, but also come with public high schools and public schools in general are such big parts of our communities that when Huonville High School become the second Australian school to win this prize, a global award, it added so much pride and honorability to our community, and it inspired them to jump on board as well and join this movement. And that's really where my journey started. But being in Abu Dhabi as a country, as representative of my country, Australia, I did meet a lot of people that, you know, were there for different reasons. And our reason was to inspire. Their reasons were to give women in Africa the right to be able to give birth with light.
Wow.
That was something that really stuck with me, and it made me really uncomfortable. But that uncomfortability was because I was recognizing my privilege. And I wanted to say that is because if anything, you know, in terms of climate justice is said that makes you uncomfortable, that means that you're recognizing your privilege, and that's a positive thing. But meeting especially these women from Malawi who won this prize as well, to be able to make solar lights for the women who were giving birth during the night time so they could see their children, you know, that's such a shock to, you know, a 14-year-old boy who, you know, just assumes that it all happens in the hospital, but actually around the world that's not how it happens, and that these are solutions that they're integrating with climate action in a whole justice aspect. And that's why climate justice is such an important thing, is because if we continue to rely on the system to solve these poverty issues, to solve these inequalities around the world, we're not solving the climate crisis that are going to, you know, continue those inequalities as well. So that was such a big part of my life, is like recognizing that, yes, I can be active in my community, but also recognizing what climate justice was firsthand.
Really inspiring, and it gives me tingles actually. I'm like thinking, just knowing that Huonville High School, you know, has had this growth, and a regional school too, where it has had such a history of divide around environment versus forestry industry, that now it will be coming through to a different sort of shift in the way that people engage with the issue of climate down in the valley. So good on you for what you did. It's incredible. That whole thing around checking privilege, I definitely had that feeling too when I was at, we were both at COP25 in Madrid, although I was with Extinction Rebellion and more on the outskirts. I had a moment where I came across some Indigenous activists from the Amazon, and they were holding up pictures of their family members who've been murdered, who were trying to protect the forest. And that I had that moment of like, whoa, you know, people are dying when they're trying to defend their cause and their forests and their homes. And that is not something we face here as protesters. And I had to sit with that for a while. And I want to sort of lead into that question around COP25 and your experience in climate summits. I wanted to ask you firstly, sort of, why do you think it's important that there's a youth voice in these forums? And also, why do you think it's important that there is a Fridays for Future movement that encourages protests by young people?
Yeah, my experience in the climate summits have been interesting, but to answer your question, why do young people have to be there, is because they've been going for 25 years and they've achieved nothing. That's longer than what I've been alive. That's why young people need to be there, is because we understand this issue more than any other generation. For 25 years, it's failed. And the best way to describe how these summits, especially the Conference of Parties, have failed is the Paris Agreement does not mention fossil fuels once. And we know fossil fuels is the root of this problem. But when it doesn't, this global climate accord that to address the climate crisis doesn't even mention fossil fuels, that's a huge failure. And it's important to have young people there, because, you know, we're part of that demographic that do have the most to lose, but we're part of that demographic that we know we have to be the most innovative generation to ever come before us. So we need to be in these spaces because we have ideas and we have solutions as well. And especially, you know, checking my privilege at COP25, there were so many realizations that, you know, the inequalities of the climate movement do go within these climate summits as well. And that come with two experiences. And I was there with a program that I run in Tasmania called the Tasmanian Youth Climate Leaders Program, where we actually do take young students from Tasmania to these climate summits. And the first experience that I had in Madrid that really stuck in my mind was we did hear a speech from a young Indigenous guy from Canada. And he just could not convey the message better than anyone else I know. He could convey this message of climate justice better than anyone I know or could ever imagine. And, you know, all four of us were in that, and we just cried because it made us so uncomfortable what he was saying. So uncomfortable, but it was true. And climate justice does go into these summits. And the second one was from Hilda from Africa, who gave a speech at the plenary hall. And she said, when I'm here, I look around and there's no African youth. We're all white. We're all from popular countries, rich countries. Why are we here? And people from the Pacific Islands, people from Africa, people from the countries that are feeling these effects are not, especially young people. That made me recognize, actually, you know, we need to play our part in changing our climate movement as well. We need to be inclusive and diverse as well. So that was my biggest take out of COP25, was how do we better improve our diversity and equity within our climate movement? Because that's what doesn't happen at these climate summits. They think that we're all going there to look at shiny pavilions with, you know, great technology that are 50 years away as young people, but we're actually there, and, you know, we're doing sit-ins. We took over the stage in the main plenary hall. We just walked up, sat on the stage, was threatened to be kicked out of the conference. And that did happen as well at another occasion, is that civil society using their voice to say, we don't agree with this, they were kicked out of that summit. Hundreds and hundreds of people were kicked out of that summit for standing up for Indigenous rights. And you know what, I'm going to keep going back to that summit. We'll be back in Glasgow as well whenever COP26 is, because I think it's important that we continue to build that civil society unrest within these global events, because these world leaders need to see that, you know, we are not agreeing with them. These are not our decisions as young people. These are not our decisions as climate activists. And these are not our decisions as civil society. These are your conflicted interests as a politician that's abusing your power. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Good on you. And like, I found it really sort of disheartening when I went to COP25, but to hear you speak about why it's so important to keep showing up has really inspired me. As we, Extinction Rebellion, we're more around the outskirts, and I think you might have heard that we dumped a pile of horse poo, and I don't know how effective that was, but I think that being inside and doing the protesting and the banging of the pots and pans, and just being there, letting them know that you want to participate and you're still there, it was so powerful. And we were watching that from the union building that we were sort of setting up in.
Yeah. And I mean, 500,000 people marched in Madrid during COP25. That is insane. But still, did these world leaders listen to those 500,000 people? No, because we still come out without, a solid accord, a climate legislation to solve the climate crisis. And COP24 as well was similar. I was in Katowice in a coal-run city, and I was really excited because I thought this was going to be, this was going to be a great opportunity for a city that relies on the fossil fuel industry to lead a global transition discussion. And, again, they had shiny pavilions, etc. And what did Katowice decorate their pavilion in? Coal.
Stop.
And then being at COP25 in Madrid, it was sponsored by a major fossil fuel company in Europe. And, that also shows the inequalities of this climate movement, is because we don't have the money to buy their votes. We don't have the money to buy their influence, where these multi-billion-dollar companies do. And that's what they do to keep winning and keep making money and keep, showing the world that they have power and we don't, which is really not okay.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you on that, how do you remain sort of sane, I guess? How do you remain sort of still motivated, knowing the sort of entrenched inequalities around this issue in terms of both the impacts and the refusal of companies and governments to act, given it feels, to me at least, so overwhelming? What sort of, I'm quite interested, tools or tips could you give to others around how do you remain sort of resilient given such an overwhelming task ahead of us as a movement?
Yeah, it is a very overwhelming, part of the world to focus in. But, for me, in staying hopeful and staying resilient, being able to, envision a world that is so much better, like to envision a world without fossil fuels, to envision a world with zero carbon emissions is just so exciting. But we need to acknowledge that we won't ever get there unless we are active in this space, unless we dedicate to this space. But also, again, as a young person, there's that automatic connection with my generational peers, no matter what language you speak or what part of the world you come from. We automatically connect, and we share our hope and we share our vision, and that builds so much inspiration and empowerment to keep going, because it puts in perspective to what I'm working for here in Tasmania is the same thing that my friends in the Pacific or Africa or Europe are working for as well. And that's so hopeful and so empowering to see that young people can organize global collaborative efforts more than our governments can. It's just so reassuring. But staying resilient, there are times where I do lay in bed late of a morning and just like, what am I doing? Why is this never going to change? But being in that mindset, nothing will ever change. So I quickly need to snap myself out of it. I need to say, okay, Toby, the world is only going to change if people like you and me continue to stay resilient and show the world that, we aren't going to back down. And we can learn from resilience from every other social movement that's come before us, whether it be civil rights, workers' rights, whether it be the nuclear non-proliferation movement. We can learn so much from their resilience because they face these, similar things with us as being an activist in a space that seems so huge. But us working together and collaboratively is so much more powerful than any other entity or government in this world. So I think, my biggest tip in staying resilient is to envision a future that you want and recognize that you play a big part in getting to that future, and you play a big part in getting there. And there are people around you in this movement that are ready to support you. They're ready for a conversation. They're ready to cry on your shoulder, and you let them cry on your shoulder. That's what this climate movement's about. It's basically, a family. And that's why I love it so much, is because, you know, you do feel like you're changing the world for a better good, and that's a good feeling to have. So everyone watching, you know, if you're watching this, you are changing the world just at home by listening to what I'm saying, because you're listening to someone different. You're changing your perspectives and you're challenging my perspectives. That's how we're going to change the world, and that's how you stay resilient.
Oh, wow. Toby, you're a brilliant speaker, and that's just such a honest and heartfelt response. And it's inspiring to me too. Since I have moments like that where I'm in bed going, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I focusing on the right thing? And I think that we all know that we're connected and that we're working towards a similar goal, and we're supported in that sense. It's really motivating. And you mentioned a few times reimagining or re-envisaging a future. I know, indulging here a bit, but I wonder how you might answer that. How would you, I guess, describe the future that you would like to live in, or the future that you would like young people to be able to live in?
Yeah. And again, from a young person's perspective, is when we ask that question, you know, what future do you want to live in? The question's always, I want to live in a future where I can, you know, I can study. You know, I wish I was studying right now, but I don't have an excuse not to. To study if I don't have an excuse not to be an activist, because I don't know what I'm studying for. But a question that always comes up to young people is like, what's your vision of the future? And our vision is just, we want a safe and equitable future. We want a future where we can bring children into this world and feel safe. We want a future where we can, you know, build a career and know that our jobs are safe. That's the future we want, but we don't recognize that we have that right now, because the world is so ever changing for the worst. But imagining what the world looks like with no fossil fuels, what the world looks like beyond fossil fuels, imagining what the world looks like, you know, powered by renewable energy, what the world looks like solving this climate justice emergency, is so incredibly empowering to keep working towards. Because if we can solve this climate crisis, we're going to break down so many barriers that have divided us for so long. And that comes to, you know, this issue is going to affect all of us, and it requires us all to work together. So when we envision, well, for me, when I envision a future and solving this crisis, I envision, you know, breaking down the barriers that have divided religions, divided gender, divided sexuality, divided all these demographics of people that, you know, stereotypically does cause conflict, or does cause, you know, discomfort, or does cause, you know, issues within these demographics. If we're working together and everyone gets their part to make the solution to build that world, imagine how incredible it's going to be able to work with everyone and respect everyone's personal beliefs, personal religions, personal decisions. That's what I look forward to. And that's the world that I think we're also working towards. We're not just working towards an environmentally friendly world. We're working towards a better society that does indulge in our diversity.
Wow, that's really inspiring again. And I'm just so excited that there are young people like yourself out there who have a strong vision and are working really hard to make that real. And thank you for fighting for a better future for everyone and for yourself. Yeah, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Rebel Talk today. And I look forward to, collaborating with you more in the future, and the movement more broadly. So yeah, thank you. And any last words that you want to say to those tuning in?
Thanks for having me, and really appreciate the discussion today. And I'm always open to messages, collaborations, calls. You can contact me on social media, but keep doing what you're doing, XR Tasmania, because you're also playing a huge part in this social movement. And sometimes, even though that we feel disconnected as Tasmanians, you're shaping the globe, and that's such an inspiring thing to remember in your mind, because that's exactly what you're doing. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Toby.
No worries.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.